All right, good evening. My name is Jeff Ryan. I'm very, very proud to have with me 8 Prescott students who made the trip to Lac du Flambeau, the Ojibwa Reservation in northern Wisconsin. It's the 17th year that Prescott High School students have made this trip. It's become a very, very important part of our school curriculum at Prescott. And I would say also a very, very important part of our community. We've had a total of 35 groups go up to Lac du Flambeau and spend 4 days learning about the history, the culture, the life ways of the Ojibwa people, and it's really been a great 17 years that this program's been around. And I'd like to give a little bit of the backstory about it. First of all, in the state of Wisconsin, beginning in 1990, the Wisconsin State Legislature sent a bill to the governor saying that all public schools in the state of Wisconsin must teach treaty rights, tribal history, and culture in the classroom at the primary grade level and at the high school level. And of course, that was in response to the ugly incidents in northern Wisconsin at boat landings while the Ojibwa were exercising their federally guaranteed treaty rights. It was a real ugly time for Wisconsin. And the state legislature decided that one of the reasons these ugly incidents were so commonplace at boat landings in northern Wisconsin was primarily people were uneducated on the issue of treaty rights and didn't really understand the relationship between the state government with tribal nations and the federal government with tribal nations. So the state legislature did a good thing and said that it's got to be taught in the high school, and also said that any teacher who wants to teach in the state of Wisconsin must receive instruction in treaty rights, tribal government history, in order to get a Wisconsin teaching license. If you do not have that, you cannot teach in Wisconsin, which I think is also a very good law. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is the fact that I teach in a district that takes that law very seriously. The law is called Act 31. And we not only teach a class entitled First Nations History at Prescott, we're one of only 2 schools in the state of Wisconsin that offer a semester class and offer it for college credit through the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. But we're also very proud that we infuse it in biology, it's in civics, it's in U.S. history. We find it in a lot of different places. I'm really proud of that. And these students were chosen out of a large pool. There were just under 30 students that wrote essays for the opportunity to go to Lac du Flambeau. It's very competitive. And they must write a 1-page essay why they want to go. And it's written anonymously. The evaluators, there are 11 of them. They are school staff, non-staff. They read the essays and they basically pick 8. And again, it's very competitive. And I stay out of it. I have nothing to do with choosing it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So I allow other people who have been involved with this project for a long time to choose those essays. So first and foremost, they should be congratulated for being chosen. And what they're going to do here tonight is kind of share some of their thoughts, some of the things that they experienced up there. We'll show a couple video clips. We might demonstrate a couple things. Then if you have any questions, you might want to ask them. I'm sure they'll be willing to answer. So with that, I guess what I'd like to have each of them do is just kind of introduce yourself, go on down the line, and then we'll just get the presentation started. So I'll start with you, Zach. Why don't you introduce yourself, say what grade you're in and what class you're enrolled in.
I'm Zach Lubick, and I'm in Mr. Ryan's First Nations History class, and I'm a senior at Prescott High.
My name's Jack Knopf. I'm a senior at Prescott High. I'm in Mr. Ryan's First Nations class. So.
I am Taylor Garza. I'm a senior at Prescott, and I'm in Mr. Ryan's First Nations History class.
My name is Philip Pena. I'm a senior at Prescott, and I'm also in Mr. Ryan's First Nations class.
I'm Samantha Ritter, and I'm a senior. I'm also in Mr. Ryan's First Nations class.
I'm Grace Carey. I'm a senior, and I'm in Mr. Ryan's First Nations History class.
I'm Cody Roll. I'm a sophomore, and I'm in Mr. Ryan's AP US History class.
I'm Morgan Jesney, and I'm I'm a sophomore, and I'm in Mr. Ryan's AP US History class.
Okay, please. If we can.
You guys.
Okay. So I just wanted to start off talking about the hospitality we were shown when we went to Lac du Flambeau. On the first day, when we drove up there, they had a meal all prepared for us at the school, and that was just so nice of them, and just an unnecessary gesture of kindness. It was just great. They welcomed us, we got to eat and talk with them for a little bit. So that was just a great example of the hospitality that is shown up on the reservation. And then also another example of just how they're just so hospitable up there is that, like Mr. Ryan says, if there's any place you want your car to break down, it's up there, because people are just so helpful and so kind and willing to help. It's just really a great experience to go up there and just receive all of the things they are willing to offer and give to you. So.
Going off of what Morgan said, Mr. Ryan's friend from the reservation, Brandon Tomes, he helped us the whole entire trip, and he has 6 kids and he works full time, but he still found time to help us and make sure we had everything we needed to have a safe and fun and educational trip up to the reservation. And I didn't encounter a single person from the reservation that was mean or rude or anything. They were all just so generous and so kind the whole entire time. It was just amazing.
And they really they don't have to, and they have reason not to treat white people nicely. So this is going to be a little history lesson, sorry, if you don't like history. So way back when Mr. Ryan was talking about the Spearing controversy, so this is history that goes way back to the late 1800s, when the treaties were being made with the US government to the Ojibwa people, where basically the Ojibwa people ceded land, so they gave up some land, which that's messy in and of itself, but that's very controversial to begin with, and I'm not going to talk about that. But when they ceded that land, there was a stipulation in all of the treaties the Ojibwa people had that said they were still able to hunt and fish in their ceded land, so they could still use it. But during the years later, during displacement and the general chaos that ensued with the treatment of Native American people by the U.S. government, that stipulation was lost until the 80s, when 2 men took a history class on Native American treaties and just legal stuff. What was the class? Do you remember what it's called?
It was at St. Scholastic. It was actually in the 70s, the Tribble Brothers you're talking about. Yeah.
And after a really long, drawn-out legal process, where it actually went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, where essentially the treaties were validated, so the Ojibwa people were allowed to continue hunting and fishing on their ceded land, which was a right that they had lost, after a century. So during this whole battle, this legal battle that happened, they'd fought so hard for just the right that they had already earned in these treaties. They didn't realize that, that would be the easy part. The hard part would be dealing with the racial backlash from white people who saw these Ojibwa people going to boat landings and spearing. And it really just dredged up all of the ugly, prejudice from white people against the Ojibwa people, that we're all living together in the same communities, but it just created a huge racial divide in northern Wisconsin. This is here. This happened here. And just nasty things were said at these boat landings. And it really just brought up the ugliness within, white people towards Native Americans. And that, despite all of that disgusting, history behind the, racial relations in that area, the Ojibwa people were still able to be kind to us and, sacrifice so much. They were just willing to give their time and energy into caring for us, basically, the whole trip. And it was just really nice. And we watched a video on these, this horrible part of Wisconsin history at these boat landings, where they had videos of people just saying nasty things. And one of the few sort of beacons of light, I guess, that I saw. And I'm heavily involved in choir, so music is a really big part of my life. So I guess, of course, the choir kid found something musical to incorporate into this Native American trip. But they had drums when they were walking to the boat landings, and they were singing with them. And the power of music and just the fearless cultural expression that happened when they had the drum. None of the protesters, the white protesters that were saying just nasty things, could get through the drum circle. They couldn't get through because there were women around the men who were, singing with the drums. And that was just so powerful to me that, music just could, power through. And we actually had a drum circle come through. Do you want to show that clip? We had a drum circle sing for us during our trip. I think it was Saturday night. Does that sound
Friday
right?
night.
Yeah. And that was so moving. They were really good. Just play the clip.
We'll play a little clip. It was the same group that played it here last fall. Name of the campground played for us.
That concludes my piece. You can go.
Now, I want to say something about the drumming. First of all, that song right there, and they played about 6 or 7 songs for us. It's all chanting. There's no words. All chanting. And typically, from what I've been able to experience, many songs might only have 5 or 6 words to them, if in fact they do have words. But it's really, really interesting, and again, to be that close and to be up close and personal to the drum is really, really fascinating. And if you've never had the opportunity to hear a drum up close or go to a powwow, I highly encourage that. Again, we're going back up to Lac du Flambeau the weekend after the 4th. There was a question as to whether or not we were going to have a summer trip, but we are going to have a summer trip. So if you're interested, anybody in the community is invited. But the drumming is very, very important. Tomahawk Circle, they've traveled all over the country. They've won some prize money in California, New York, very, very successful. And four of the drummers, four of the singers are the age of the students, so that makes it even more interesting. And they have a great reputation there in Flambeau, Tomahawk Circle.
Okay, so another huge part of their culture was the beadwork they did, and it was very elaborate beadwork with these tiny little beads they used. And we got the opportunity, as one of our workshops we had up there was to make these little earrings out of these beads. And it took us, I mean, they're just little earrings, but it took us, I don't know, like 2 to 3 hours just to finish maybe the 2 earrings. I only finished one, so.
And they're like tiny. They're like this big, the size of a quarter.
Yeah, and the beads, they didn't just, used them to make many things like jewelry, clothing, bags, wallets, anything pretty much. And it's like a huge part of their culture, and they also have these little beads that are almost the size of a grain of salt. So they're very tiny beads. And it's very hard to work with, so it's like, it took us a long time to it was really hard. And it's very surprising because you see some of these really elaborate outfits made out of these beads that someone or maybe a little family made using these beads. It was just really crazy, but If you have a really short attention span, I wouldn't recommend trying it. It's not easy, but it was fun.
And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the 4 medicines of the Ojibwa Nation. And so I'm going to kind of show you a little piece of, this is cedar, and this was from the north, I believe. And so it's kind of used for smudging, which is they burn it and then they use the aroma to smudge itself, which is kind of a purification type thing. And so then another one, which is sage. There's 2 little bundles of it. It's also used for smudging and healing purposes. We were told by Brandon Tomes that you could put it in tea, you can burn it, and like just so many things you can do with it. And then there was another one, which was sweetgrass, which was from the south, and it kind of represents the Mother Nature and kind of just showing the kindness of her and just kind of respect. And it's also a ceremonial piece. And then tobacco, which I don't have here. It's more of an offering. So whenever, if you were to take, even if you were to take one of the 4 medicines, you would leave some tobacco as an offering, showing respect for what you're taking from the earth and kind of just giving back to it. So kind of what they use for all those 4.
So one of the more eye-opening experiences for me, and I'm sure everyone else, was the trip we took going to the boarding schools that they had there in town. And when we walked up the steps, like when you walked in there, it was still the same as it used to be back then. They used the same, paint on the walls, and so that was really cool. And see, what the boarding schools was used for was that they would take children, even up to like 5 years old, and even younger than that, but they would measure children using a stick. And if you were the height of the stick, that you could go to the school, and they would take them from their families, and they were forced to go to these schools and stay there in unacceptable living conditions, and they were stripped of their culture and anything that had to do with who they are as people. And it was just mind-blowing for me, and we got to see some of the pictures that they had on the walls just taken from that time, and you could tell that the kids in the pictures weren't happy. They were very sad, and there was even artifacts in these glass boxes, and that in itself just sent like chills down my spine, and it was really eye-opening, and I don't understand. And the fact that they still have the boarding school open and people still use it for other purposes just is really cool, because they want people to know about this history and what happened, and they're not, they don't want to cover it up. And I think that's really awesome, and it just kind of proves the point that these boarding schools didn't work, and that they didn't abolish, Native Americans as a culture and as a nation. And I thought that was really awesome. And then we also have a video from...
Did everybody want it renovated, Taylor?
No, not everyone did. Some people wanted to, just not talk about it like it was they had, bad experiences from being in the school. So they just, brought up a lot of negativity. So not everyone wanted these schools to stay here, but...
There are people in the community who wanted it burned to the ground. They wanted to burn it down. Jack, did you want to play see some of the pictures here?
This was from a board near the entrance, like depicting old pictures and renovations. So this is old pictures from when it was first built, whatnot. This is before they started renovating what the building looked like so far, after all these years of no use.
The renovation was way over $1 million. Way over $1 million project.
And like we said, when people wanted it burned to the ground, there was an attempt to burn to the ground, which was all renovated completely. As you can see here, what part of the building was burnt pretty bad.
want to put like a movement, if you will, amongst
Can you
these.
pause it for a second? When they were renovating, one of the things they did, they found these in the walls. Toys, different things in the walls from students that were there. One of the things we weren't able to see, and I saw this last summer, was a full uniform, a uniform for a boy. And the uniform was made of burlap. Burlap pants, burlap jacket. And I'm going to say a few more things about this, but we'll watch a little bit of this.
So I don't know if this is the exact doll or whatever, but to me, that's what that doll represents. I mean, I've heard that here in my community and didn't hear it from an elder who actually was given a doll for that very same reason. So to me, that this is probably my most favorite piece that we have found. You can see these toys and stuff here that were found as well. This little thing right here is has powder in it, still fragrant. So I thought that was pretty cool to have found that as well. And then over here, we have some other pieces. When we do projects on the reservation, and if there's going to be a significant impact, because my program is also responsible for all the archaeological work, we do excavations. And I'm sure you guys have probably seen an excavation, even similar, like we're digging up dinosaurs, it's the same process. So some of this stuff was identified during the excavation as well. A lot of these photos we have obtained either from community members or from like the Historical Society down in Madison or the Chicago Archives. And we just blow them up to be able to show that time period, of course. And from beginning to, you'll notice where there's kids.
In First Nations history this week, we're starting our boarding school unit, and I think it's the most crucial unit that we talk about in class. I would argue in order to understand so many of the issues that you have in reservations today, you need to understand this era. And it's really a remarkable era, remarkable not in a good way, but in a bad way. And the students are going to find out, maybe you've heard the phrase before, kill the Indian, save the man. That was the school motto. Kill the Indian, destroy the culture, destroy the person, save the man. And that was basically the motto of the boarding school system. It began in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Some of you have probably heard of Jim Thorpe before. The athlete, Carlisle, Richard Pratt, kind of the brainchild of the boarding school system, kill the Indian, save the man. And that basically was the motto that was basically used at boarding schools all over the country. There are elders on the reservation, Lac du Flambeau, who will not go into that building. They just will not go in the building. Elders who talk about various types of primarily psychological abuse, some physical abuse where youngsters were made to scrub the floor while kneeling on pencils. If you've ever done that before, I highly recommend you see what that feels like. And that was something that was done. It's just a real tragic chapter for Native people. And in the state of Wisconsin, actually, the state of Wisconsin passed a law in 1906, was called the Browning ruling, the Browning Rule, where Native parents had no rights regarding the education of their children. Had no rights. The state could come in and take their children. If they would fight, if they would deny, they could be arrested. Zero rights regarding the education of their children, which is really remarkable. And Lac du Flambeau was different because the school was on the reservation, yet the kids weren't allowed to go anyplace. And kids talked about and wrote about being upstairs and hearing the drum off in the distance and not being allowed to be with their parents or not being allowed to be with, their grandparents. I mean, it was just a devastating chapter. I mean, you go after the kids, it was nothing more than cultural genocide. We want to destroy the culture. That is the purpose, destroy the culture. And as Taylor said, it didn't work, which is remarkable. I got one more anecdote I heard this story from a Ho-Chunk elder down in the Wisconsin Dells about 5 years ago, talking about going to the boarding school in Toma. And he said, well, the story that we were told was our grandparents said of doing this during recess. They would climb trees, And the superintendents and the teachers like, wow, look at these kids climbing up, way up in the trees, way up in the trees. Wow, look at that. Why were they climbing trees? So they could speak their language. So they down on the ground couldn't hear them do it. So that's how the Ho-Chunk language, that's one of the stories, how the Ho-Chunk language survived. When I first heard that story, it just made the hair rise in the back of my neck. So, I mean, you go up there and you read about this boarding school and take a look at why. You know, Native people don't really know who they are. Well, it makes sense. When the systematic attempt to destroy the culture, I mean, that was the purpose. That was the purpose. That was the role of the boarding school, to eliminate the culture. So, and it is directly connected to the logo and mascot issue. It is directly connected to it. You know, not having any idea who you are, and allowing, I'm sorry, a professional sports team to define who you are by slapping a logo on a helmet. I mean, it's really, really tragic, really tragic. But I think it's the most important chapter of Native history that is not understood. And it's sad. And they're going to see some things in class in the next 2 weeks that are going to it's going to make your head spin. It's going to make you angry. And I've always said if people really knew that story, most people would say, yeah, no, I understand. I understand now. So I think this is, you know, for me, it's the most important part of the tour, is the boarding school. Anyway. Well, we're going to show a clip about Brandon's, not the spearing thing, the ice fishing thing. I think that's kind of an interesting one.
So what happens is the spearer will bring all his...
Stop there for a second. Instead of just showing it, what's this about? You want to say what this is, Philip?
Well, this was kind of a representation of how they would ice fish in the winter. And so they would drill a hole or cut a hole in the ice and put a tent over it and some tarps on the ground to make it black so there's no light shining through the ice. And then they'd have their lure on a stick and a string, and they would just, so we'll talk about it, just kind of move it around the ice or in the water until fish will come and just they'll try to spear through there.
And Brandon Tomes, he was our kind of our guide for the whole weekend. Great guy.
He'll have, a set of sticks, 6, 7 sticks, straight sticks, a couple feet in length. He'll have balsam or cedar boughs, and then he'll have his canvas wrapping for his teepee, and he'll have his spearing equipment, of course. So he'll pack this all around to the ice. He'll chisel his hole with in the ice, and then he'll take his balsam or cedar boughs, and he'll lay them down around where the hole is, and then he'll take his poles, his tent poles, and he'll set them up into a teepee. So if you can imagine a teepee right here, probably about 2 or 3 feet high, and then he'll lay a blanket or some other cloth material out, and he'll wrap the teepee, the poles, with that blanket or that canvas, and then he'll lay a blanket down on the ice where he's going to lay down. So then he shimmies in here. Go ahead, crawl up. And then, so he's laying down on the ice, and he's got his spear in one hand, and he's got his jig and his decoy in the other. Jig or decoy. So he's going to start jigging, and he's going to close the tent around him so that it's completely dark. It's blacked out. And once it's blacked out in the daytime, you can see straight down to the bottom of the lake easily. So he's going to continue to jig like this, and you'll see different fish come in, because fish are really inquisitive. They're curious creatures. So they're going to come in, and he's waiting for that big one. So when that big one comes in, sometimes they'll come right in and they'll hit the decoy. Bang! They'll hit it. You got to be really fast to try and spear them. A lot of times the fish will go under, he'll come to the side of the decoy, and he'll just sit and he'll hover. And he'll watch what the decoy is doing. He's deciding whether he's going to go after it or not. Sometimes he'll go underneath the decoy. But ultimately, he's going to take his spear, and when that fish comes into range, when he comes close enough, like he's going to come up to hit the decoy, he's going to spear him. A lot of times the fish will take off, but he's got a rope tied to his wrist to the end of his spear pole, so that's how he does it, that's how he catches fish. And this is historically a traditional method of harvesting fish, and it's done in the wintertime, this sort of spearing. Now, this is different from spring spearing, which is done in open water at night. This sort of spearing is done on an ice-covered body of water, a lake or river. It's ice-covered in the daytime. So that's the difference. And this is still, to this day, this is a huge art form in Lac du Flambeau, this is a very popular method of harvesting. And what a lot of sports anglers don't like is that we can go off reservation to use this sort of method in the winter. So they'll see teepees set out on the lakes, and they don't like that because they say, well, we can't spear, so Indians have special rights. No, we really don't have special rights. We have preserved rights, which means we've always done this since the beginning of time. So it's not a special right that was given to us, it's an inherent right that we've retained over time. And that's the difference in understanding the basic premise of treaty rights. So, but I think you're kind of natural on that, man. And then, especially when you're jigging, you want to mimic
yeah, there are a lot of guys who still do this, and in fact, I'm friends with a few guys who will always show their muskie that they get through the ice whenever it happens, and they get some big fish, and Brandon said something really, really important, and I like to make it even more, simplify this even more. We talk about treaty rights, we're really talking about a property right. We've all done this. If I was to sell Mr. Knopf 80 acres of land, now again, exercising treaty rights, nobody owns the water. The water is a public resource, public land. Treaty rights cannot be exercised on private land. We know they can't. But going back to Mr. Knopf, this is essentially what the Ojibwa did. If I was to sell him 80 acres of land, and I will say to him, well, I burn wood in town, I'll sell you the land, but I want to continue to cut wood for the fireplace I have in town. If he says yes, I'm going to sell him the land, but I'm going to keep on going out there and cutting wood. It's the exact same thing that the Ojibwa did. Or maybe there's an apple tree out there. I want to continue to go out there and pick apples and get the apples from that apple tree. It's the exact same thing that happens with land being bought and sold all the time. So when we talk about treaty rights, it's really a property right, and we always talk about this in class. I always say, do you actually think for a second that the Ojibwa would have agreed to those treaties believing that they would give up the right to hunt, fish, and gather on the land? There's no way they would have done it. That's why they signed those treaties. Go ahead, you can use the timber, you can use the resources, but we want to continue to hunt, fish, and gather on that land. So I think that's really, really important. But look, it's a property right that they reserved, forever.
To add on to the spearing decoys or whatever. It's not like these pieces of wood. It's like made out of wood. I mean, the carvings on them are like insane. I'm a huge fisherman, so I mean, it was insane to me. Like, it's going in a circle the way they make the fins on them. So the way they angle them, the weight on the fish. I mean, I can't imagine how long it would take to make one of those. And on the wall, I can't see it now, but it was just full of decoys.
Pictures at the end of the video. I could check it first over there.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's a lot of focusing on how to make them. It's insane. Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, if you can kind of see it, I mean, there's usually, obviously they have all different colors, but on the fins and stuff, I mean, they're a metal, and then there's a weight in the fish. So when you lift up the stick, it would go in a certain motion and stuff. So it was really cool.
Lac du Flambeau was known for their decoys, their spearing decoys, and some of them sell for $350, $450.
We'll start fire.
Yeah.
All right. So up there, we learned how to make a fire out of scratch. Obviously, we've heard the way how to rub two sticks together. I guess this is a different way to see it. I might put these chairs if you don't mind. These guys want to see it. I'm not going to start a fire obviously in here because that might not be a good situation. But so you can make these yourself. So one of the Mr. Ryan's really good friends, his name's Nick Hawkins, sadly he passed, but he made him just a giant bunch of them. So you grab the stick. This is kind of the stick that you put in this. I forgot what it's called.
What kind of wood is the base board and the drill?
Is it cedar?
No, it's basswood.
Basswood. There we go. Okay, so it's basswood.
It's got to be softwood. Basswood, pine will also work.
Okay, good. So it's softer wood, so it can last a little bit longer too. So you put this thing in the holder, put the rock on top, because obviously you're not going to put your hand on it because it's going to cause friction. And your hand might hurt up a little bit. So slowly you put your foot down to have brace on it.
Grab the end of the bowl.
The end of the
No, the end of the bowl.
Oh yeah, I'm on the wrong way.
No. Your hand there.
There.
Well, you got the wrong end though.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it still works. So you want to constantly keep it on and keep your arm straight too. So you don't want those strings to keep on going up. So you kind of just keep it at a simple thing. And as soon as you start seeing smoke on that little wedge, it's going to take a while here. So you see the smoke rising? See the smoke, then you go faster and press down harder on the rock, and it'll create kind of like a powder type spiel. And usually you'll have a
That's good.
usually you'll have a kind of like a light, what is that called stuff?
Jute.
Jute is what is usually that you put right next to it, and so you can kind of see that there's a kind of like a powder here. Usually there's like an amber in there that will light the jute on fire. So you grab it and the jute, maybe I'll grab it later and show you. You kind of wrap it up in a taco with the thing inside it, and you blow and blow and blow until it bursts into flames pretty much. And then you set it on the ground and then you put the dead leaves or whatever to build your fire. So it was, everybody in the group, we all made a fire, so it was really fun actually. I had a good time. So yeah.
It's one of the things that they'll do during the summer. Every year we go, we try to do that. And it's kind of frustrating, though, is it not? It can be frustrating, and when they start seeing fire, start seeing smoke, they get all excited, and they really don't have a hot. It's really got to get hot. The ash has got to be really, really hot when you're done, and you pull the drill off. It'll just smoke. If it's still smoking, you should be able to get a fire, but it's got to get really, really hot. And it's kind of a fun accomplishment once you get it done to be able to say that you got fired. Who was the first one to get fired?
That was me.
Okay. Yeah, so that's why I had them demonstrated. But yeah. I guess I want to ask each one of you a question, and I want to start on the far end because I haven't heard from them on the far end here a little bit. I guess I'm curious as a teacher, and this wasn't a question that I asked them to be ready to answer, but I would hope they'd be able to answer, is what did you learn? What did you learn? What was something that you learned? Or was there something that you thought was going to be true that wasn't true? I mean, were your expectations met? I guess that's my question.
So I think probably the biggest thing that I learned was really about the boarding schools. I was completely unaware of that. For me, the entire trip was really just an eye-opening experience. We just learned so much, but I would say probably the biggest thing would be the boarding schools and just the history behind that. It was just a really amazing and really cool thing to learn. So
what I learned, I'd probably say that I learned how extreme and how bad the spearfishing incidents were. Just how incredibly, it terrified me watching the video on the spearfishing incidents, and I never knew how extreme it actually was, and it was crazy.
This is more of a cultural thing that I noticed. There were gender roles a lot in the culture of the Ojibwa people, but they weren't bad. And I guess I've always sort of grown up knowing that you should just abolish all sort of gender roles because that can lead to oppression and just a lot of bad things. But they were just different. It was just different, just like a delegation of jobs. And I think it just like brought up a lot of just like a new thread of conversation for me on just sexism and stuff like that. And I don't know, it was just really interesting to see the different culture there. Yeah, because women weren't like treated less than. It was just they had different roles. Like they were the historians and sort of the knowledge keepers. And I don't know, it was just really interesting for me.
Well, I know I learned a lot when I was up there, and a lot of things left an impression on me, but the big one was that the spearfishing, like Cody said, the fact that I didn't realize how mean people were. Like, the video, it was intense, and it was hard to believe that people could actually say that to other people and treat them the way they did, and
they wanted them dead.
Yeah.
That was it wasn't about fish. They wanted them dead. Like
yeah,
that.
it was more than just the fish. It was like something. It was obviously more than just fish, because people wouldn't get that upset over just some fish in that case, and it was horrible.
The film that they're referring to was a film that was made in 1995 called Lighting the Seventh Fire. It's a great film. Brandon Tomes is actually on the film. And there is a YouTube series that was done that we'll be watching in class. It's called After the Storm. It's 25 years after what happened on the landings. You can find that online. It's called After the Storm, and it includes some of the bad stuff, some of the awful stuff. And what was really interesting for me, I don't know if it's interesting or not interesting, is seeing a lot of the footage at landings and recognizing people. And that's, I've always said I'd like to go back, because I haven't, go back, and I've seen those people who were doing a lot of the screaming at the landings, but I'd like to have a conversation with them now. What are your thoughts now? And, you know, one would say that the animosity there has disappeared. A lot of people up there are saying it's coming back. It's percolating back to the top, and that's sad. Very, very sad.
Well, for me, like, I know I learned so much about the culture and the history of everything that happened there, but it was honestly just to see all that history and culture, but then to see it's still there now. Like, it didn't, what you saw the boarding schools and you see what happened at the landings, but it didn't, like, it affected them, of course, but it didn't stop who they were. And just, like, walking down the street, we got to see amazing people. Just, we met random guy on the street, met him, and he was probably one of the coolest guys I've ever seen. His name was Cola, and you could just see these are people every day, and everyone think, like, you picture a Native American and you don't really see them on their everyday life, but it's not, their culture's not over with, and that's kind of what I learned. So.
Going on this trip, I had no idea what to expect, and I think one of the more unfortunate things is people don't know about their culture. They don't know who they are, and that was a big thing for me. I wanted to experience that, and I think the big thing that I learned was how much hatred and how much hate was like being towards them by, you know, white people, and being there, experiencing, hearing their stories, especially with the boarding school and the spearfishing and all this hatred they had to deal with, but they still wanted to talk to us, and they're still so passionate and so nice to us, and that was mind-blowing and eye-opening experience for me, and I have so much respect for them and compassion. I really appreciated that. So, and just knowing that the stereotypes are still here today, and, you know, trying to do something about it was.
I wonder why Mr. Ryan keeps going up there. And I mean, you'd be sitting there talking to these natives, and they just look you right in the eyes like they've known you for a long time. And they're so great. I mean, they're so nice. And yeah, again, I just understand why you go up there. And again, I'm like what's saying so nice and like caring. I mean, like Brandon Tomes, he had 6 kids, and I mean the way he treated his one kid at football. I mean, went to football, and he came back to us. I mean, I was just surprised that he came back to us and stuff.
Bought us breakfast.
Yeah, bought us breakfast.
Took care of his grandma.
Yeah, Yeah, took care of his grandma. That was another huge one. His grandma was blind, correct? Or she was losing?
Close to, yes.
Yeah, close to losing her sight. And I could just tell that he loved her. And that was huge to me. I mean, just the way he treated her, the way he took care of her, the way he fed her. I mean, it was just really heartwarming, honestly. So, yeah.
Well, one of the big things I learned up at Lac du Flambeau was how important like tobacco was to most people as like an offering or a gift. In other words, like if you would say hi or thank you, you give them some tobacco and it'd be like a big deal, somewhat. Like it'd be like, what's the word I'm looking for? A really big thank you, in other words, for them. And also how bad people were treated during the controversy of the spear fishing stuff during the 1980s was also really terrible for them, and how they still treat us so nice is just amazing because of what we kind of did and how mean we were, and they're still just nice to us and giving us like hospitality and whatnot. It's just amazing.
I want to speak to something that Grace talked about, the gender thing. And I too, I think that that's fascinating. I just want to show you something here. This drum was made for me by Nick Hawkins as a surprise, big surprise, a gift. And when he gave it, it's a real long story, and I'm not going to tell the story, but it's my life. It's my life. And when he gave it to me, when Nick passed away 4 or 5 years ago, when he gave it to me about 12, 13 years ago, he told me the story. It took quite a while, and usually it's very difficult for me to shut up. I didn't really have a whole lot to say when I got this. But going back to the gender thing, and this is something that I'm really, really proud of, and it was something that was really fascinating to me, and I heard from time to time up there on the reservation, Nick Hawkins used to always say, and other people say, if you want answers to questions, you ask a woman. You don't ask a man, okay? Because women have the answers. Women know what's going on, don't ask a man. And I always thought that was one of the reasons why the girls and the other women who've gone up during the summer have liked the trip, because they like hearing that over and over again, that the men don't have a clue, and they make bad decisions, and the women are the one who have all the answers. But when I got this, I just want to tell a quick story about this. When I got this, talking about symbolism, and you were talking about the medicines, and Philip talked a little bit about them. Colors too, but it's not just natives. I mean, all cultures have colors that have meanings and everything, and just like, I hate to go back to the old stereotype when people always talk about Native people on the plains, they killed buffalo and they used all the buffalo. They used everything. I say, well, I would argue my ancestors 200, 300, 400 years ago, when they killed an animal, they used everything too. How else do you explain blood sausage and blood pudding and all that stuff? So I always say that, the similarities between cultures are much greater than the differences. But talking about gender though, when I got this, when Nick told me, he says there's a reason why it's two colors. The stars have symbolism, and the moon, and this black line is very important. This is a thunderbird, but yellow, from what Nick told me, yellow is a feminine color. It's feminine. Blue, this is for the Ojibwa, blue is masculine. And he said the Ojibwa believe that, whether right or wrong, he says the Ojibwa believe that, of course, this goes back to the stereotype and the gender roles, that there are feminine traits and there are masculine traits. Masculine being strong, tough, courageous, whatever. Feminine, being gentle, kind, a nurturer, so on and so forth, saying that there are feminine traits and there are masculine traits. Blue is masculine, yellow is feminine. And when he gave this to me, he said, the Ojibwa believe that a person cannot be a human being unless they have both traits. You have to have both. You can't just be all one or the other. You have to have the character traits of both. So I thought that was pretty cool. So when you talk about gender, saying that you can't be all macho, arm wrestling macho, and not be kind at the same time. So that's one of the things I think is also really, really important, that message of gender roles, but then showing how those roles are connected. So I thought that was a real astute observation. I wanted to applaud you for that. That was good.
Can we see the back of that?
Yeah. He made this for me. He had a little, he being Nick, and he also painted for me. He said, never buy a drum that has been painted. If you buy a drum, make sure it's not painted. He says, you don't know who painted that. He says, you know what was the state of mind of that person, who painted it, what kind of a mood were they in. He said, don't buy one that isn't painted. But he painted this one for me, so I thought it was okay. So anyway. Anybody have anything else to add? Anybody have any questions for the group or anything? Maybe Dan wants to sing.
I have a question. So you talked about what you learned. Are there things, or maybe multiple things, that you learned, or things that had eye-opening experiences that you're going to carry forward into the future? So we kind of know a little bit about what you learned, but has this experience altered the way you think about yourself, your own culture, your own family, or what you want to do in the future?
Okay, I can start, I guess. So another one of the things, this is another cultural thing that I saw. I thought it was really it really moved me that they cared so much about the elderly, because American society especially, we kind of throw away people once they no longer are able to work. That's a very big problem here, and it really moved me that they cared so much for 90-year-old people when we just sort of send them to the nursing home and call it a day. And I don't know, that really changed me. And my family's pretty young. My grandma's only 65, so we're not quite there yet. But I guess I've noticed that I've just been visiting my grandma a lot more, because they just care so much about their elders, and they're just so important. And yeah, that really changed me. I guess I was kind of ungrateful to my grandma before, because she's so young, she's not going to die, in 2 minutes. So, yeah.
And to go off of what she said about the elders, it made me realize, they said that the elders are so important also because you can learn so much about the past because you weren't there, but they were there, and you can learn about what they saw and the history of that time. And that made me want to speak with my grandparents more and get to know more about what they saw and about when they were young, my age, what it was like for them. It just makes me realize you should probably spend more time with your grandparents and learn more about what their life was like.
And going off with what you guys were saying, I mean, not only grandparents, but just, your family. You need to talk more with your family and be with them, because being up there, everyone was so close, and it was such a big community, and I felt like everyone was family. And so I thought that was so cool. And now and again, when I come home, I talk about, issues of, logos and stuff like that, and I talk with my parents about it, because they didn't really know a lot about what was going on, and I know a lot of other people don't. And so it's just fun to come back and talk about what I've experienced and how I feel about this issue, because it's really important to me, and to be able to talk about it and say that I've witnessed this and I've been there is just really important to me.
Something I noticed too is you can't forget where you came from. Their culture, that's so important to them right now. They have to try to remember. They're putting it back into the schools, just making sure it's a focus. And so I'm kind of just hoping that I can use that for my life, just to remember my culture and heritage and be able to just use that every day.
Anybody else?
Just took the words out of my mouth.
One of the things I think we have to, I don't think the students, I think the students recognize that, there are people in Lac du Flambeau who do not know their culture and are not interested in their culture and have no interest in their culture. And again, it goes back to that boarding school experience, but one of the things, and Philip talked about this too, saying that the tribe is really working hard at trying to reintroduce the culture and trying to get the culture to help Lac du Flambeau and the community rebuild itself. Personally, I think it's something that the tribe is really working hard on. Not just Lac du Flambeau, but all tribal communities in Wisconsin are struggling with that, because we know the language, once the language is gone, the culture is gone. And when you only have, in 1890, just over 200,000 Native people left total in the United States, it is remarkable. I mean, they had an opportunity to meet 2 fluent speakers, and there's less than 2 fluent speakers up in Lac du Flambeau. And they met 2 of them. And anytime I see a fluent speaker of a native language, I think it's a miracle, because there's no way that the language should have survived. And again, second time I said that, I think it's great that Philip mentioned that, because it's something that the tribes recognize they have to do. They have to make sure that they revisit the past, and they speak with their elders and get that language back in, because again, if the language dies, the culture dies with it. So that's a real challenge for the people up in Lac du Flambeau, and it is sad there are people who really have no interest in learning who they are. But again, they're doing their best to try to change that.
More questions?
Any last thoughts? Dan, you're not going to sing?
As tempted it is, no.
I just want to say, come do the trip. Summer.
Yeah, what about that? Yeah.
Summer,
Any of you have plans going up again, do you think? You see yourself going up?
I definitely see myself.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely for sure.
Why?
Why not?
There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
Just the amount of, 4 days that we were up there. I mean, I learned so much information. It was insane. And just, campfires, sitting around, have a good time and stuff. It was just a really good time, honestly.
It was nice to be off our phone.
Oh, yeah. No coverage or nothing.
You know?
Just sitting there and listening to everybody. And it was great, honestly. It was,
Good time.
yeah, for sure a good time.
Other questions?